Hello, I'm Janusz Rawiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. And on today's episode, we're diving into the world of international agreements, specifically one focusing on a recent development that sounds like it came straight out of a geopolitical soap opera. Picture this: Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and China, three countries united in a grand ambition to build a railroad that connects Central Asia to the rest of the world. It sounds like a done deal, right? Well, hold on to your rail passes because things are not quite as simple as they seem. And as usual with Belt and Road infrastructure projects, it's best to follow the money. So jump in, make yourselves comfortable on our Eastern Express service to Central Asia. We apologize for any unexpected geopolitical delays.
The current China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan road rail transport service has proceeded over 100 trains this year, marking an expansion and a development in the regularity of its services. Since the beginning of July, the number of freight trains arriving in Xinjiang for further transit has increased to an average of 2 per day. In March, a new operational model was introduced in which all transported goods are checked before departing, allowing them to be shipped directly to their destination without the need for additional customs check at border crossings. The change has reduced customs clearance time from 3 to 5 days to just 6 to 8 hours, significantly increasing the efficiency of the transport surface. Moreover, the long-planned new China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway project is likely to move forward after months upon months of uncertainty. The heads of state of the three participating countries have signed an intergovernmental agreement to transform the railway from a vision into a reality. The official communiques were not overly specific. Participants in the online signing ceremony did not mention the project costs or the construction schedule. The railway route would stretch from the western Chinese transport hub of Kashgar to the Uzbek city of Andizan in the Fergana Valley, passing through Torgard and Makmal. The cost of the project was widely seen as the biggest obstacle so far, as plans to build the railway date back more than 20 years. It is estimated that it will cost nearly $8 billion to complete the rail line.
And now we're zooming in on Central Asia to explore the issue in greater detail. The proposed railway, officially known as the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan Railway, is a big deal. This isn't just about laying some tracks. This is about creating a new Silk Road. The route promises to shorten transit times, cut costs, and create a vital link between East and West. It's like the ultimate Tinder date for countries. All parties swipe right and it's a perfect match, or so it seems. This railway project has been talked about for decades, and in September 2022 it seemed like we're finally getting somewhere. The leaders of Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and China got together and they inked a deal to start building this long-awaited project. Finally, some action. But as any good drama teaches us, the path to true love, or in this case truly lovely infrastructure, is never smooth. Fast forward to now, and surprise, surprise, there are complications. You see, while the ink on the agreement was still drying, the fine print was already causing headaches. As it turns out, agreeing to build a railway is the easy part. The devil, as they say, is in the details. For one, there is the issue of financing. Building a railway across challenging terrain isn't cheap. Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, not exactly rolling in cash, are looking to China for the lion's share of the investment. China, however, has its own economic challenges and isn't as eager to bankroll the whole thing without some serious guarantees. Then there is the matter of route planning. The original plan was for the railway to run through southern Kyrgyzstan, but this route has raised concerns. Some argue that it's not the most efficient path, and there are questions about the economic viability of this route versus the available alternatives. Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan are eager to boost their economies and improve regional connectivity, but they also have to balance their relations with their powerful neighbor, Russia. Moscow isn't exactly thrilled about losing its influence in the region to China, and this adds another layer of complexity to an already convoluted situation. As if that was not enough, there is also the question of environmental impact. Activists and local communities are worried about the potential damage to ecosystems and displacement of residents. Building a railway isn't just a technical challenge, it is a social and environmental one too. So, while the leaders smile and shake hands for the cameras, there is a lot of grumbling happening behind the scenes. In the meantime, we get to watch this international project unfold. Will they build it? Won't they? Who knows? But we'll be there to bring you all the updates as they happen. And now, we're moving on to our conversation of the day. Here to shed more light on the issue is Bruce Pannier, Central Asia Fellow, Foreign Policy Research Institute. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you for having me.
So, thinking about this contemplated railway connection, it's always important to look at the bigger picture, especially for China. Why would it be advantageous, especially for the Chinese authorities, to build this railway?
Well, we know that, of course, the Russian route is the so-called Northern Corridor is complicated now because of the European Union sanctions on Russia. China has its Belt and Road initiative that it's been pushing for many years now. The route that goes through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan would actually shorten the journey, one to South Asia, if you wanted to trade with through Afghanistan and possibly Pakistan and get to the Pakistani ports. Also, if you're headed west and you want to go across the Caspian to Europe or through Iran and into the Middle East. So it's a shorter link. It diversifies China's routes, leading both to southern Asia and west into Europe and into the Middle East. So there's actually some good reasons for doing it, although it's a complicated project.
Now, is China also trying to basically cover its tracks, no pun intended, when considering shipping routes? Not only are they way longer when it comes to the transportation of goods from China to Western Europe, for example, but also they are leading through fairly geopolitically fraught regions, including the Red Sea, obviously the activities of the Houthis, but also the Taiwan Strait. So would you say that China is trying to solve a problem it may actually give rise to in some unspecified future?
That's absolutely part of the reason for China to engage in this project. Again, China has shown historically that it diversifies its supplies or its routes everywhere that it can. It's been doing that for years, right? So it has some solid allies on its western border in Central Asia. China's invested heavily in the Central Asian region. It's investing in Afghanistan now. It's a partner with Iran in many projects, including both of them being in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is also true for the Central Asian countries. So the political ties are really good when going west. If you look at where this railway goes and where it could lead to going that way, it's fortuitous, as you mentioned. With the Houthis causing problems with Red Sea traffic for maritime trade, that they do have this other route that's contained. It's all in land except for possibly the Caspian Sea. So in that respect, it's at the moment anyway a lot more reliable than shipping goods, as you mentioned, by Taiwan and try to get them through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. So it does provide China with an extra guarantee, I suppose, for transport and trade routes that are going, again, west or into the Middle East.
So on paper, it seems like very much a win-win scenario. No problems caused by any third parties. Also, no trouble should China decide to stir up some sort of unrest in Taiwan. And also not leading through Russia or Belarus. So no sanctions impeding the transportation of goods from China. In theory, it seems perfect. So why hasn't it actually been initiated yet? What's with the delay?
Well, there's a couple things at work here. One, obviously, Russia is not happy about this. Now, the Kremlin won't talk about it very much, but the fact that China has a new route that it's spending a lot of money on that avoids Russian territory entirely is not something that the Russian leadership wants to hear very much. The other thing is that it's been a little complicated logistically, technically. This is a tough railway to build, right? 490 kilometers long. But 320 of that roughly runs through Kyrgyzstan, and it's almost all through the mountains. So they're going to have to build anywhere from 40 to 50 tunnels and anywhere from 80 to 95 bridges through there. A lot of it's going to be constructed at 2,000 feet above sea level. But I think more importantly for Beijing, since they've essentially accomplish the same thing in their railway to Tibet. The more important thing for Beijing is that they knew that the countries involved in this railway project, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, were going to have a hard time finding the money for this. Now, in Kyrgyzstan's case, this problem is especially acute. The majority of the railway does run through Kyrgyzstan. They already owe China a little bit less than $2 billion in external debt to Chinese banks. They're going to have to take another loan for this. And I've seen figures of $2.2 billion that they're going to have to accept from Chinese financial organizations, and they have no hope of paying that back. And it would be decades. I know the Kyrgyz officials say, look, it'll open up trade. It will make the money back through transit fees or shipping our own goods or something. But realistically, that's not going to happen for really decades. Uzbekistan's debt's a little bit less. But so this has been the big problem for China is while they might like the idea of the railway, again, it shortens time. They can ship goods to and from Afghanistan. And remember that China is involved in several mining projects in Afghanistan. So this is the way they're going to get the raw materials out of Afghanistan is going to be via this railway. Again, it also connects them to Iran. It's going to connect them to the Caspian Sea and from there on to the Caucasus, Southern Caucasus, and on to Europe. But the fact that particularly Kyrgyzstan was going to have to go so deeply into debt for this was troubling to the Chinese leadership and has been for a long time. So that's really been what's holding it up, is the fact that it's not a lot of money for China, but it's money that they're not likely to see return to them anytime soon.
Now, some people say that China tends to see opportunities where others see problems. Would it be the case here as well? I mean, of course, like you've mentioned, the repayment would be a problem. But then, wouldn't it also be an opportunity to ensnare another country even further, greater political dependency, knowing that they are not able to repay this immediately? That would make them more amenable to any sort of pressure from Beijing, which would be coming their way, right? Especially with regards to Kyrgyzstan, obviously, to a lesser extent, perhaps Uzbekistan also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been part of their policy in Central Asia for 25 years now. I think the government in China is happy with the fact that the Central Asian governments, really almost all of them, are deeply in debt to China at the moment. It gives China several things, right? One, of course, Central Asia is a majority Muslim region. So by investing in projects in Central Asia, huge projects in some cases, multi-billion-dollar projects, they're guaranteeing that the governments of Central Asia anyway won't criticize China for its policies towards Muslims in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, for one example. They know that the Central Asians will abstain from it or say nothing about it at all. And in fact, publicly, they've supported this one China policy. So the money that they've spent in China, the money they've spent in Central Asia has been money, I suppose you could say, is well spent, looking at it from the point of view of the Chinese leadership. I mean, it's bought the loyalty of the Central Asian governments. And in cases like what's happening with the Muslims in Xinjiang, it's bought the silence of the governments in Central Asia. And in the meantime, they've managed to open up all kinds of new trade routes. And they're taking huge amounts of raw materials out of Central Asia. I mean, Kazakhstan supplies 10 million tons of oil to China annually, and they're going to double that soon. And Turkmenistan supplies anywhere between 30 and 40 billion cubic meters of gas every year, pipelines that China helped to build. And then, of course, there's the roads and the railways. And if you talk about dependency, Afghanistan, of course, hasn't really been dependent on any one nation because they've been kind of isolated due to fighting in the country. But, with this railway that they're building now through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, that is a solid link that China is going to have to Afghanistan, and that will make Afghanistan much more dependent on China than it has been certainly in the past, and arguably more dependent on China than Afghanistan is on any other country.
And it also seems ironic in this context that this railway would run from the Xinjiang province. Now, moving on to Russia, you've mentioned that there was some opposition from them, but how did the current geopolitical situation influence this? It is said that Russia doesn't really have any sort of leverage now that they are in political dire straits following the attack against Ukraine, the imposition of sanctions and so on. So would dependency on China essentially make them unable to launch any sort of complaints and expect these complaints to be taken into account in Beijing?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a great point, obviously. in the Russian-Chinese relationship, China is absolutely the senior partner now. I don't think anyone would dispute that. Maybe some people in Russia might find that hard to swallow at the moment, but that's just the way it is. I mean, China holds all the cards in its relationship with Russia. China wants to open these trade routes too. Now, it's not coincidental that this railway through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan is being built at a time when Russia is really in no position to contest this. Again, there's sanctions on the routes through Russia, so China has a legitimate reason for trying to find alternative routes that it can transport its goods to to the West and in the Middle East. And at the same time, the balance of power in the Sino-Russian relationship has shifted so much to China that there's really not much Russia can say about this. Russia's trying to get Sibir, their gas pipeline, the second strand of their gas pipeline in the Far East, to China too. So, if they want to complain about the railway a lot, then China, again, has a diversity of sources for gas. It can just totally scrap the entire idea of building another pipeline from Russia to China. There's other levers that China has too that it can easily pull if it needs to bring the Kremlin into line. So, again, there's a lot of people in Russia are probably unhappy because once this railway is built, and there's other projects that China is involved in with Central Asia that are logistics and transportation and trade. Even when the war in Ukraine is over and decades into the future, these routes will already be built and they will be competing against anything that Russia has. So it's really lose-lose for Russia all the way around. They're the weaker partner in the relationship, and China's doing what's in its own interests. And they really don't care what Russia thinks or says about it.
And by the time these investments are completed and they begin operation, Russia will probably realize that the train has already left the station, pun intended this time. Bruce Pannier was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
Great. Thank you so much.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Elvira Nabiullina, the current governor of Russia's central bank, has confirmed that the Russian economy has reached a level of overload not seen in 16 years. Most recently, her financial institution was forced to raise interest rates from 16 to 18 percentage points.
The Russian economy is struggling with high inflation, which exceeded 8% in the first quarter of 2024. Russia's GDP growth is estimated at 5%, but mainly thanks to injections of trillions of rubles for military manufacturing. Moreover, the Russian market lacks workforce due to the mobilization of hundreds of thousands of workers for the Ukrainian front. According to Nabiullina, the labor force and production capacity of the Russian economy are practically exhausted. Nabiullina claims that staffing and production shortages could lead to a situation in which economic growth will slow down despite all demand stimulation attempts. Russian financial problems do not end there, however. Local sources claim that Ukrainian intelligence services have initiated a week-long, large-scale DDoS attack on Russia's central bank, significantly disrupting its operations and affecting most of Russian online financial services.
Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico warned that Slovnaft's supply of diesel to Ukraine will be halted until Kyiv resumes deliveries of crude oil to Slovakia from Russia's second-largest oil exporter, Lukoil. Ukraine's July sanctions package led to the stoppage of Lukoil deliveries to Slovakia and Hungary, as the company was no longer permitted to use Ukrainian infrastructure.
Fico, a vocal supporter of Vladimir Putin, spoke favorably on the possibility of a future cooperation with Russia and said diesel provided by Slovnaft accounted for 10% of Ukraine's total national requirement. Fico said he and his foreign minister had received Ukraine's ambassador to Bratislava and told him that Kyiv's sanctions hurt Ukraine, Slovakia and Hungary while leaving Russia virtually unscathed. He also said that the issue of crude oil transiting Ukraine would not change his government's position on the war, which is that the fighting must cease, as trying to bring Russia to its knees benefits only arms producers. Fico also said his government rejects the policy of a new Iron Curtain in Europe and that if the European Union wants to free itself of the influence of the United States, it will have to consider ways of cooperating with the Russian Federation, which should include strategic raw materials.
Turkish and Armenian diplomats are to meet at the Armenian-Turkish border amid efforts to normalize bilateral relations. The envoys will discuss confidence-building measures that can be developed between the two countries.
At their last meeting in Vienna, the parties agreed to open the land border to third country nationals, but no progress was made in implementing the agreement. The border is closed after the two neighbors broke off diplomatic relations in 1993 over disagreements regarding Nagorno-Karabakh, an enclave in Azerbaijan that until September 2023 was inhabited mainly by ethnic Armenians. Azerbaijan and Armenia fought wars in the 1990s and in 2023 over control of the region. Apart from Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia and Turkey disagree on whether the deaths of some 1.5 million Armenians under the Ottoman Empire more than 100 years ago constituted genocide. Historically, Turkey strongly denied that the killings, which began on 24th of April 1915 with the mass arrests of Armenian intellectuals and activists in Constantinople, were part of a genocidal campaign. In recent years, some 30 countries, including Russia, France, Germany and the United States, have officially recognized the murders as genocide.
Gas from Russia is transported to Europe through pipelines running through the territory of Ukraine. Kiev is considering replacing these supplies with supplies of Azerbaijani gas. However, experts suggest that this plan risks Ukraine and Azerbaijan becoming conduits for concealed Russian exports.
Russian gas transported via the Ukrainian pipeline currently accounts for about 5% of EU's total supplies. Azerbaijan could supply only 2 billion cubic meters of the 14 billion that the EU receives through the pipeline. New solutions are being considered as the transit contract between Naftogaz, the national energy company of Ukraine, and the Russian state energy group Gazprom expires at the end of the year. There is no prospect of extending that contract, as Kiev has refused to negotiate directly with the Russians since Moscow launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The termination of the contract increases the risk of gas shortages in countries on the bloc's eastern flank, including Slovakia, Hungary and Austria.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.